He was a titan of technology, a man who could bend the digital world to his will. Yet his multi-billion-dollar empire was teetering on the brink of collapse. A single elusive bug in his flagship software had become a ghost in the machine, and his army of elite engineers was powerless against it. He fled the chaos of the boardroom for the quiet anonymity of a restaurant, seeking a moment's peace. But through the clatter of the kitchen, a glimpse through a crack in the door made him stop cold. A waitress, her hands flying across a beat-up laptop, stared at a screen filled with lines of code that looked impossibly familiar. She wasn't just typing. She was performing digital surgery. And in that instant, Alexander Sterling realized that the answer to his prayers might not be in a sterile lab, but in the calloused hands of the woman about to serve him coffee. The San Francisco fog, a familiar ethereal blanket, did little to cool Sterling's temper. It clung to the panoramic windows of his corner office on the 50th floor of the Nexus Dynamics Tower, blurring the glittering lights of the city into a watercolor haze. To the world, this view was a symbol of his triumph. Tonight, it felt like a gilded cage. On the massive holographic display dominating one wall, lines of red text scrolled endlessly, a digital waterfall of failure. Fatal error. Memory allocation failure. The message was the epitaph of his company's most ambitious project, Odyssey, an AI-driven logistics platform poised to revolutionize global supply chains. It was supposed to be his legacy, the crown, jewel that cemented Nexus Dynamics not just as a tech giant, but as an essential pillar of modern commerce. Instead, it was a multi-hundred-million-dollar disaster. For 3 weeks, the bug had haunted them. A phantom, a memory leak so insidious and unpredictable that it defied every diagnostic tool. The platform would run smoothly for hours, sometimes even days, before crashing catastrophically, bringing simulated global shipping networks to a standstill. His lead engineers, hand-picked prodigies from MIT and Stanford, each with six-figure salaries and egos to match, were stumped. They spoke in circles about recursive loops and heap fragmentation, their confidence eroding with every failed patch. Their latest all-night session had ended just an hour earlier with the same grim result. The pressure was immense. Their biggest client, retail behemoth Vidian Global, had issued a final ultimatum: fix the bug in 72 hours, or they would pull their 9-figure contract and sue for damages. Such news would crater Nexus's stock and send competitors, like the circling sharks, at Innovate Corp, into a feeding frenzy. Get out! Alexander had growled at his exhausted team, his voice dangerously low. He couldn't stand the sight of their defeated faces any longer. Now, alone in the silence, he felt the crushing weight of it all. He was Alexander Sterling, the man who had built an empire from a garage. He thrived on impossible problems. But this was different. For the first time since his teenage years, hunched over his family's perpetually broken-down Ford, he felt helpless. He needed to escape. Grabbing his sleek black cashmere coat, absurdly out of place against his frayed nerves, he bypassed his private elevator and chose the public one, craving even the brief anonymous contact of strangers, though he couldn't meet their eyes. The damp night air hit him like a shock. Dismissing his waiting driver with a wave, he walked aimlessly. Through the financial district, a ghost in his own city. The glass and steel towers he had once helped finance now loomed like mocking monoliths of failure. Blocks later, he found himself standing before an unassuming restaurant. The Gilded Spoon. It was an old-world place, a relic of a different San Francisco, its warm light spilling through the windows like a promise of quiet solitude. The antithesis of his life. He pushed the heavy oak door open. Inside, the restaurant was hushed, the clinking of silverware and soft murmur of conversations. A soothing balm. A host led him to a secluded booth in the back. He ordered a steak he knew he wouldn't touch, and a glass of Macallan 25 he knew he would. As he nursed the scotch, the warmth spread through his chest, but not his mind. His gaze drifted to the staff, moving with practiced, efficient grace. A ballet of service that was, in its own way, a perfectly functioning system. His eyes settled on one waitress. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with intelligent, focused eyes that seemed to catch everything at once. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe ponytail, her posture taut with a coiled energy that suggested her thoughts were elsewhere. Her name tag read Amelia. She moved with quiet competence, refilling glasses, clearing plates, answering questions with polite but distant smiles. There was an aura of fierce intelligence about her, a sharp contrast to her humble surroundings. He was on his second scotch when he saw her slip through the swinging doors into the kitchen. 10 minutes passed. 15. The doors swung constantly as chefs and servers rushed in and out, but Amelia did not return. Curiosity, a welcome distraction from his own anxieties, grew. The restroom was down a short hallway past the kitchen entrance. As he passed, the door swung open and he caught a glimpse inside. Amidst the chaos of steam, stainless steel, and shouting cooks, he saw her. Tucked into a cramped alcove beside a stack of flour sacks sat Amelia, not polishing silverware, not on a smoke break, but hunched over a battered, decade-old laptop, its screen glowing in the dim light. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, moving with a speed and precision that he, a man who'd coded his first program at age 12, recognized instantly. This wasn't the typing of someone writing an email or a college paper. It was the fluid staccato rhythm of a programmer, a creator of worlds. He froze, his hand still on the restroom door, squinting to see her screen. It was a dark mode IDE filled with lines of code. Then he saw it. A specific function call, a multi-threading protocol she was implementing. Elegant, complex, and eerily similar to a section of the Odyssey codebase his own team had been struggling with for weeks. His breath caught. The world seemed to slow. The clatter of the kitchen dulled into background noise. A waitress, hidden away in a kitchen alcove, was typing code that mirrored the very heart of his company's billion-dollar crisis. Impossible. Absurd. And yet, it was happening. Right in front of him, he forgot the restroom. He forgot his steak. All that mattered was the woman weaving digital spells in the middle of garlic-scented chaos. For a full minute, Alexander Sterling stood frozen, a statue of disbelief. His mind, usually a superhighway of calculations and strategies, was gridlocked. Every instinct told him to dismiss it. Coincidence, a trick of the light. Maybe she was working on some coding boot camp project. But no, the code he'd glimpsed wasn't amateurish. The structure, the syntax, the elegance, that came from mastery, not memorization. He inhaled deeply, the air thick with roasted chicken and cleaning supplies. Insane. But desperation is the mother of insanity. What did he have left to lose? His pride. That had already been stripped. From him 3 weeks ago in a conference room full of blank-faced engineers. Pushing the swinging door open, he stepped into the chaotic symphony of the kitchen. Heat, noise, and smoke slammed into him. "Hey! Staff only!" a burly chef barked. Sweat dripping from his bandana, Alexander ignored him, his eyes locked onto Amelia. She hadn't noticed him yet, her brow furrowed in concentration, lip caught between her teeth. Absolute focus. He moved toward her corner, stepping over a mop bucket. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Amelia's head snapped up. Her eyes widened in surprise, then tightened with professional panic. She slammed her laptop shut in an instant. "You can't be back here. Is there a problem with your meal?" she asked, slipping her waitress mask back on. "The problem isn't with my meal," Alexander replied, his gaze flicking to the closed laptop. "It's with a recursive memory leak in a multi-threaded AI logistics platform. Her mask didn't just crack, it shattered. Amelia's jaw slackened. The color drained from her face. Those sharp, intelligent eyes he'd only glimpsed before now looked wary, calculating. She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't feign ignorance. She knew. "Who are you?" she whispered. "My name is Alexander Sterling." Recognition flickered across her face, subtle but unmistakable. Her eyes widened. A sharp inhale. She knew the name. Everyone in tech did. Her gaze darted from his expensive suit to his face. The pieces clicked. Nexus Dynamics. Odyssey, she breathed. Not a question, but a statement. "You've heard of it," Alexander said, watching the last of his skepticism vanish. "I follow the public devlogs. The pre-release buzz," she admitted, clutching the laptop like a lifeline. "You're in trouble. The launch is supposed to be next quarter." "The launch will be canceled, and the company gutted. If we don't fix a bug, my entire division." "Can't find," he said bluntly. There was no point hiding it. "What were you working on just now?" She hesitated. Her eyes darted to the chef, watching them suspiciously. "A personal project." "Don't lie to me, Amelia," he said softly, but with an intensity that made her flinch. "I saw your screen. I saw the threading protocol. A predictive resource allocation manager. Am I wrong?" Her knuckles whitened around the laptop. She swallowed. "No, you're not wrong." "I want you to look at our code," Alexander said, reckless words leaving his mouth before he could stop them. "The Odyssey code." She stared at him as though he were speaking another language. "What?" "Sir, I'm a waitress. 5 minutes ago, you thought I was a programmer. Which is it? Which one is the real me?" "Both," he countered. "I'll pay you. A consulting fee, generous. NDA, ironclad. Just look at it." Her mind was clearly racing. Fear, disbelief, and something else. A flicker of longing, of hunger. "Why me? You have the best engineers in the world." "The best engineers in the world have been staring at it for a month and are sinking my company," Alexander said flatly. "They're trapped in their own box. You're not. You have nothing to lose, and neither do I." He could see the conflict burning in her. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, handed to her by a billionaire in a greasy kitchen. But it was also terrifying. The risk of failure, the risk of humiliation. I can't," she stammered, shaking her head. "I don't have a degree. I dropped out of Caltech after 2 years. My mother got sick. I've been working here ever since. I just code for myself to keep sharp." The confession hung in the air, thick with disappointment and lost potential. Caltech. She wasn't just self-taught. She had been on the path to becoming one of the elites he so readily hired. Life had simply gotten in the way. This revelation didn't deter Alexander. It galvanized him. This wasn't a random fluke. This was untapped genius, derailed by circumstance. "I don't care about your degree, Amelia," he said, his voice firm. "A degree is a piece of paper that says you can learn. What I saw on that screen says you can do. I care about results. The Odyssey platform is failing because of a flaw in its predictive modeling. It allocates resources for projected shipments. But somewhere in the recursive logic, it creates phantom allocations. It never releases them. It's bleeding memory, but we can't find the wound. Does that sound like a problem you'd find interesting?" He watched her as he spoke, detailing the core of the problem. Her expression shifted. The fear receded, replaced by the focused, analytical look he had seen when she was at her keyboard. She was no longer a waitress talking to a customer. She was an engineer considering a challenge. "Phantom allocations," she murmured, almost to herself. "It's not just in the recursion. It could be in the way the threads are instantiated. If the parent process dies before the child threads are properly joined, their memory could be orphaned." Her insight was immediate. A plausible theory his team had mentioned, but hadn't fully explored, convinced the error was buried deeper in the AI model itself. Alexander pulled a sleek black business card from his wallet. "Nexus Dynamics Tower. Be there tomorrow at 9 a.m. Ask for me. I'll clear it with security. Name your price, Amelia. Whatever it is, I'll pay it. He placed the card on top of her closed laptop. Her hand trembled slightly as she looked at it. The simple black card, his name embossed in silver, was a ticket to another world. "Sir, your table?" she asked, the habit of her job kicking in. "Forget the table," Alexander said, turning to leave. He paused at the door and looked back at her. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the card. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m., Amelia. Don't make me regret this." He walked out of the kitchen, leaving the noise and chaos behind. A jolt of adrenaline coursed through him, sharper than anything he'd felt in years. It was the most illogical, unprofessional, and desperate move of his career. It would either save his company or become the final spectacular act of a falling titan. The next morning, the lobby of Nexus Dynamics Tower was everything the Gilded Spoon was not. It was a cathedral of brushed steel, glass, and stark white marble, vast and intimidating. A two-story waterfall cascaded silently behind a reception desk that looked like a shard of meteorite. Young, ambitious people in sharp business attire moved with a silent, urgent purpose, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. The space was designed to awe, to project power and innovation. To Amelia Rose, clutching the strap of her worn backpack, it was designed to make her feel small. She had spent the entire night oscillating between euphoric excitement and paralyzing terror. She researched the Odyssey problem, devouring every scrap of public information, her mind alight with possibilities. She arrived in the most professional clothes she owned, a simple black blouse and slacks, which still felt woefully inadequate compared to the designer labels around her. "I'm here to see Alexander Sterling," she told the receptionist, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Amelia Rose." The receptionist, a man with impossibly perfect hair, typed her name into his computer. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Of course, Ms. Rose. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Please go right up. 50th floor." He gestured toward a restricted access elevator, which chimed and opened as if by magic. The ride up was a silent, stomach-churning ascent. When the doors opened, Alexander Sterling was waiting. He looked different here, in his element. The weary desperation of last night was gone, replaced by an aura of command. "Amelia, glad you made it," he said with a curt nod. "Let's not waste time." He led her through a maze of glass-walled offices and open-plan workspaces. Heads turned as they walked. People stared, curiosity piqued by the unfamiliar woman being personally escorted by the CEO. Amelia felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, judging her clothes, her backpack, her very presence. She had never felt more like an imposter. They entered a large conference room already occupied by a dozen engineers. The air was thick with tension and stale coffee. This was the Odyssey team. They all looked exhausted, but their expressions sharpened as Alexander walked in with Amelia. "Everyone, this is Amelia Rose," Alexander announced, his voice leaving no room for argument. "She's a consultant who will be providing a fresh perspective on our current problem. Give her full access to the Odyssey source code, the server logs, everything. She will report directly to me. I expect your full cooperation." A heavy silence followed. The engineers exchanged uneasy glances. Amelia's eyes fell on one man in particular. He was in his late 30s, dressed in a sharp suit with a condescending smirk that seemed permanently etched into his face. A nameplate on the table identified him as Benjamin Carter, lead software architect. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the table. "A consultant?" he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. His gaze flicked up and down, lingering for a moment on her simple clothes. "May I ask which firm you're with, Ms. Rose? Or perhaps which university's doctoral program we've poached you from?" The question was a clear challenge, designed to humiliate her and undermine her authority before she'd even begun. The other engineers watched, waiting to see how she would respond. Before Amelia could speak, Alexander cut in, his voice like ice. Her credentials are that she has my confidence, Ben. That's all you need to know. Get her set up. The rebuke silenced Benjamin, though his eyes burned with resentment. He gestured curtly to a junior engineer. Kevin, get Ms. Rose a guest terminal and access credentials. Kevin, a nervous young man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, led Amelia to a small, empty desk in the corner of the main development floor. It was clearly a temporary spot, an afterthought. As he typed furiously, setting up her access, he spoke in a hushed tone. Don't mind Ben, he whispered. He's just on edge. We all are. He's been leading this project for 2 years. He sees it as his baby. And it's a sick baby, Amelia replied quietly, her eyes already scanning the architecture diagrams pinned to a nearby wall. Once she had access, the world outside fell away. The whispers and stares of the other, engineers, the intimidating corporate environment, even the looming presence of Benjamin Carter, all of it faded into the background. Before her, on a high-resolution monitor, was the Odyssey source code, millions of lines, a sprawling, complex digital city. She spent the first few hours just reading. She didn't try to change anything. She simply absorbed the structure, the flow of data, the logic that governed this artificial universe. She navigated through modules named Predictive Path, Quantum Route, and Nexus AI Core. It was brilliant, ambitious, and deeply flawed. The code was like a beautiful, intricate tapestry, with a single thread pulled, causing the entire image to warp in a way almost invisible up close. The team had focused on the AI core, convinced the leak was born from the complex machine learning algorithms. But Amelia, guided by her instinct from the night before, gravitated toward the foundational layers, the code that managed memory and process allocation. It was less glamorous, the plumbing of the system, and she suspected it had been given less scrutiny. By midday, she began to notice a pattern, tiny, almost insignificant discrepancies in the timestamps between a resource request and its allocation log. Milliseconds of lag that shouldn't exist. She tried to access the deeper server logs, the ones that showed hardware-level interactions, but her access was denied. Amelia found Kevin. I need kernel-level log access for the primary simulation servers, she said. Kevin paled. I can't grant that. Only Ben can authorize that level of access. It's a security protocol. Amelia walked over to Benjamin's desk. He was on the phone, speaking in loud, self-important tones. When he saw her approach, he deliberately turned his back, laughing at something the person on the other end had said. She waited. When he finally hung up, he swiveled in his chair with an exaggerated sigh. Yes? I need kernel log access, she stated calmly. He scoffed. Absolutely not. We don't give consultants root access to our most secure servers. Do you have any idea the proprietary data you could compromise? I'm trying to trace a memory allocation issue. The standard application logs aren't granular enough. The discrepancy I'm seeing happens at a level below what they capture, she explained, keeping her voice even. A discrepancy, he sneered. Listen, Ms. Rose, I have a team of the world's best engineers who have built this system from the ground up. We've run every diagnostic imaginable. I assure you, if there were a discrepancy to be found, we would have found it. Why don't you go back to your desk and consult? It was a dead end. He was stonewalling her, protecting his territory. He couldn't stand the idea that an outsider, a woman with no official credentials, might find something he and his vaunted team had missed. It was a matter of ego. Frustrated, Amelia returned to her terminal. She couldn't go deeper, so she would have to go wider. If she couldn't see the root of the problem, she would have to map its effects. She began writing a custom diagnostic script. It wasn't a fix, but a tracer, a program designed to run alongside Odyssey, monitoring every single thread it spawned, tracking its memory footprint, and logging its behavior in a way the existing tools didn't. She worked through the evening, long after most of the team had gone home defeated. Benjamin Carter left with a smug look in her direction, as if her continued presence was proof of her failure. Only Alexander Sterling remained, working silently in his glass-walled office, watching her as the city lights began to sparkle outside. Amelia felt a grim determination settle over her. Benjamin Carter saw her as a threat to his authority. The team saw her as a bizarre curiosity, but she knew she was close. The ghost in the machine had left a trail, faint as it was, and she was the only one willing to crawl into the dark, forgotten corners of the system to find it. The lion's den was cold and unwelcoming, but she wasn't there to make friends. She was there to hunt. The next 48 hours blurred into a sleepless, caffeine-fueled marathon. Amelia lived in front of her terminal, the glow of the screen her only sun and moon. The temporary desk became her world, littered with empty coffee cups, scribbled diagrams on napkins, and the occasional sandwich brought by a sympathetic-looking Kevin Alexander Sterling kept his distance, but she felt his presence, a silent observer in his office, his own lights burning late into the night. He was giving her space, a commodity she desperately needed, the diagnostic script she wrote, which she privately named Cerberus, was her hound. She let it run in the simulation environment, and it began to paint a picture. The memory leak wasn't consistent. It didn't grow linearly. It happened in violent, sporadic bursts, always coinciding with a specific set of circumstances. When the Odyssey platform was simulating high-volume, short-distance shipping routes, like citywide drone deliveries, this was a critical clue. The team had been focused on massive international cargo simulations, assuming bigger loads meant a bigger strain. They were looking in the wrong place. The problem was in the churn. The system was designed to create, track, and destroy thousands of tiny delivery routes per minute. Each route was a thread, a short-lived process. The theory she'd mentioned to Alexander in the kitchen about orphaned threads gnawed at her. Benjamin Carter's refusal to grant her kernel-level access was a roadblock, but it forced her to be more creative. Late on the second night, with the 72-hour deadline looming like a guillotine, she found it. It wasn't in the AI core's complex, predictive models. It wasn't a catastrophic, obvious flaw. It was a single, elegant, and devastatingly simple bug in a low-level library, a piece of foundational code written years ago and assumed to be perfect. The library handled thread management. When a new delivery route was created, the library would instantiate a handler thread. A separate, seemingly unrelated cleanup process was supposed to run periodically, checking for completed threads and releasing their allocated memory. The problem lay in the interaction between the two. The cleanup process had a timeout. If it couldn't get a lock on a handler thread within a few milliseconds because the thread was still initializing or momentarily busy, it would skip it and move on. In long, slow simulations, this was never an issue. But in the high-churn scenario of thousands of rapid, short-lived threads, a statistical certainty emerged. A small percentage of new threads were being created and destroyed so quickly that the cleanup process always missed them. The thread would complete its task and die. But because the cleanup process had skipped it, its memory allocation was never officially released. It became an orphan, a ghost. It wasn't a leak. It was an accumulation of ghosts, thousands of tiny, forgotten memory, blocks accumulating over hours until the system choked and crashed. A wave of dizzying euphoria washed over Amelia. She leaned back in her chair, her body aching from exhaustion, but her mind electric. She had found it. She had found the ghost in the machine. The fix was just as simple. A small change to the cleanup process. Instead of skipping a busy thread, it should queue it for the next pass. A 3-line change to solve a billion-dollar problem. Her first instinct was to run to Alexander's office, but she stopped herself. She needed proof. Irrefutable proof. She modified her Cerberus script to log every time the cleanup process skipped a thread. Then she ran the high-churn simulation. The log file exploded. It was the smoking gun. She saved her proposed code change, the log file, and a concise step-by-step explanation of the problem and her solution into a secure folder on the local server. She named the folder Odyssey Solution AR, her initials, a small act of ownership. It was 3:30 a.m. She decided to get 2 hours of sleep in a small, unused wellness room before presenting everything to Alexander at first light. It was done. But she hadn't been working entirely alone. Benjamin Carter had been watching her. Consumed by a mixture of professional pride and raw fear, he couldn't accept that this waitress could succeed where he had failed. He had seen the lights on. He had seen her fanatical focus. That afternoon, feigning a need to help Kevin with a server issue near her desk, he had installed a keystroke logger and a screen-sharing spy tool on her terminal. It was a gross violation of privacy and corporate policy, but he justified it as monitoring a security risk. From his home office, he had watched her every move. He saw her isolate the high-churn scenario. He saw her focus on the thread management library. And then he saw her find the bug. His blood ran cold as he watched her type out the simple, elegant solution. He saw her run the final diagnostic, saw the damning log file, and watched as she saved everything to the folder marked Odyssey Solution AR. Panic gave way to a dark, cold ambition. She had found it, but she hadn't reported it yet. She was an outsider, a nobody. With no proof she had been the first one there. He, on the other hand, was the lead architect. It was his project, his team. Who would they believe? Working with feverish intensity, he replicated her work. It was easy now that he knew where to look. He copied her 3-line code change, making a tiny cosmetic alteration, changing a variable name, so it wasn't an exact duplicate. He wrote his own explanation, plagiarizing her logic and passing it off as the result of his team's tireless, round-the-clock effort. He created a new folder, saved his own version of the fix, and then, with a final malicious act, used his administrative privileges to access the server. He found her folder, Odyssey Solution AR, and deleted it. Then he wiped the access logs for that specific directory, covering his tracks. Her proof was gone. At 7 a.m., just as Amelia was waking up stiff and sore on a wellness room sofa, Benjamin Carter sent a company-wide email to Alexander Sterling and the entire executive board. Subject: Urgent. Breakthrough Odyssey Platform Stability Issue. Solved. The email began, "After a final intensive deep dive session led by myself, my team has successfully identified and resolved the critical memory allocation flaw in the Odyssey platform. The solution is prepared for immediate implementation. A full technical debrief will be ready for your 9 a.m. meeting." He had won. He had stolen her breakthrough, her moment of triumph, and claimed it as his own. The stage was set for his victory, and Amelia Rose was about to walk onto it, completely unaware that her ghost had been exorcised, only to be replaced by a far more tangible demon. Amelia walked into the 9 a.m. board meeting, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She clutched her tablet, ready to present her findings, the elegant simplicity of her solution a source of quiet pride. She had slept only a few hours, but the adrenaline of discovery was a potent stimulant. She entered the 50th floor boardroom to a scene of celebration. Benjamin Carter stood at the head of the table, basking in praise. The other engineers, relieved and jubilant, clapped him on the back. Alexander Sterling stood by the window, a look of profound relief on his face. He caught Amelia's eye and gave her a nod of acknowledgement, one she misinterpreted as anticipation for her presentation. "A truly remarkable piece of detective work, Ben," said Robert Morrison, a portly board member. "You've saved the company." Benjamin smiled, wearing a mask of magnanimity. "It was a team effort. We never lost faith in our process. We simply had to drill down past the application layer and re-examine the foundational thread handling protocols. A subtle race condition. But we caught it." Amelia froze, her tablet suddenly feeling like lead in her hands. Thread handling protocols. Race condition. He was using her words, her discovery. A cold dread washed over her so intensely it made her feel nauseous. "Ben, walk us through it," Alexander said. With smug confidence, Benjamin projected the code onto the main screen. He presented the three-line fix, his cosmetically altered version, and explained the logic behind it with the clarity of a man who had only understood it for 4 hours. He described how the cleanup process had missed rapidly cycling threads, creating orphaned memory blocks. He presented it as the triumphant culmination of his team's tireless work. Amelia stood in stunned silence, invisible. It was her work, her breakthrough. He had stolen it, every last piece. She looked around the room. The engineers believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was their leader. She was just the strange woman who had sat quietly in the corner for 2 days. "Excellent work," Alexander said. The words were a punch to Amelia's gut. Then he turned to her. "Amelia, thank you for your time. Your input in directing the team's focus was clearly valuable. Please see my assistant about your consulting fee. We'll make sure it's generous." Dismissal. He was dismissing her. To him, she had merely helped. Ben had delivered the solution. The injustice was so sharp, so bitter it stole her breath. Her voice trembled. "That's my solution." Benjamin let out a short, pitying laugh. "Ms. Rose, I understand the desire to be part of a victory this significant, but let's not get carried away. My team and I worked on this. The commit logs will show that." He was right. He had covered his tracks. Her folder, her proof, was gone. "I found it last night around 3 a.m., she insisted, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "I wrote a diagnostic script, Cerberus, to trace the thread skips." "A script?" Benjamin scoffed, his tone dripping with condescension. "We have dozens of professional diagnostic suites. We don't rely on amateur scripts. Mr. Sterling, I think the stress of the situation is perhaps causing some confusion." All eyes were on Amelia. To them, she looked like a fraud, a desperate wannabe trying to steal credit from the hero of the hour. She turned to Alexander, pleading silently. In his eyes, she saw relief, but also a flicker of doubt. He remembered their conversation in the kitchen. He remembered her immediate theory about orphaned threads. Ben's explanation was too neat, too sudden. "Let's just focus on the solution," Alexander said, his voice neutral, diffusing the tension. "The important thing is that it's fixed. We can deploy the patch and notify Vidian Global." The meeting concluded. Benjamin was a hero. Amelia was a ghost, haunting the edges of a celebration that should have been hers. Defeated, she turned and left the boardroom, the sound of cheerful planning fading behind her. She had failed, not in finding the bug, but in navigating the treacherous world of ambition and deceit. But Alexander Sterling hadn't built a billion-dollar empire on blind faith. He was a systems analyst at heart, and that applied to people as much as to code. Amelia's desperate plea, her specific mention of a script named Cerberus, the timing, it all felt wrong. Benjamin's sudden breakthrough after weeks of failure, just hours after Amelia had been given access, was too convenient. He remembered the look in Amelia's eyes in the kitchen, the raw, unpolished brilliance. He contrasted it with Ben's polished political maneuvering. While the company celebrated, Alexander returned to his office and closed the door. He didn't call security. He didn't want a corporate investigation, something that could be managed and sanitized. This he would do himself. He opened a secure terminal, one with the highest level of system privileges. He wasn't just a CEO. He was still a coder at his core. First, he searched the entire server for any file named Cerberus. Nothing. It must have been on her local terminal. Next, he looked for the folder she'd mentioned, Odyssey Solution AR. It didn't exist. As Benjamin had boasted, it was gone. But Alexander knew that deleting a file on a high-security server didn't always mean it was truly gone. It was merely marked to be overwritten. He initiated a low-level sector scan of the server's drives, aka process that would take time. While it ran, he examined the server access logs. As Benjamin had predicted, the logs showed Benjamin Carter accessing the core library and committing the final code change around 7 a.m. Clean. Too clean. A man covering his tracks often sweeps too thoroughly. Alexander widened his search, looking not just at file access, but at all administrative command logs for the entire server partition over the last 12 hours. And then he found it. At 3:47 a.m., Benjamin Carter's administrative account had initiated an RF command, a forceful, irreversible delete, on a directory named Odyssey Solution AR. Immediately after, at 3:48 a.m., the same account ran a command to manually clear the access log records for that specific directory for the preceding 5 minutes. It was the digital equivalent of a murderer wiping fingerprints from a crime scene. Benjamin hadn't just deleted her work. He had tried to erase the very fact that he had deleted it. But he made a mistake. He cleared the file access log, but not the higher-level command log, which recorded the clearing itself. It was an act of supreme arrogance. He never imagined anyone, least of all the CEO, would dig this deep. A cold, hard anger settled in Alexander's chest. The sector scan finished. The deleted folder was partially recoverable. He restored it. Inside were Amelia's original files, her beautifully commented code, her detailed explanation, and the Cerberus log file, its timestamp reading 3:32 a.m. The evidence was irrefutable. It was a complete documented timeline of discovery and theft. He looked at the recovered files, then at the record of Benjamin's deceit. The betrayal wasn't just against Amelia. It was against the company, against the very principles of innovation and integrity upon which he had built Nexus Dynamics. He picked up his phone. He didn't call security. He didn't call HR. He called the head of the board, Robert Morrison. "Robert," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Get everyone back in the boardroom. Now. The celebration is over." The mood in the boardroom was one of confused but pleasant anticipation. Board members and senior engineers filed back in, their faces flushed with relief at a crisis averted. They took their seats, the air buzzing with chatter about calling their families, about the soaring stock price that would surely follow the announcement. Benjamin Carter was the center of this jubilant universe. He strode in with a confident swagger, accepting handshakes and pats on the back. He sat at the head of the long, polished table, not as a lead architect, but as a conquering general, ready to receive his laurels. In his mind, he was already composing the email he'd send to a headhunter, leveraging this victory into a more prestigious, higher-paying role at a competitor. Amelia was not among them. Alexander had sent her a discreet message through his personal assistant, instructing her to wait in the quiet solitude of his private office. He needed her away from this, away from the explosion he was about to detonate. When the heavy glass Dr. hissed shut, sealing the room, Alexander remained standing. He didn't take his seat. He stood beside the massive dark monolith of the main display, his posture rigid, his face a mask of cold gravity. The cheerful murmurs died instantly, replaced by a wary, uncertain silence. Every eye in the room turned to him. "Our celebration," Alexander began, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight, "was premature. We have indeed found the solution to the Odyssey problem. However, the wrong person has been given the credit for it. And the real story reveals a rot within this company far more dangerous than any memory leak. A tense stillness fell over the room. Benjamin Carter's self-satisfied smile faltered. Replaced by confusion and alarm, he shifted in his seat, his bravado evaporating like mist. "Ben," Alexander said, locking eyes with his lead architect, his tone unnervingly sharp. "You told us you and your team identified the thread handling issue after an intensive all-night deep dive. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's correct," Benjamin affirmed, his voice a fraction less steady. "It was a complex issue, a subtle race condition. We worked tirelessly following a lead." "A lead?" Alexander cut him off, stepping forward, his voice laced with chilling sarcasm. "That's fascinating, because the solution was actually found, documented, and finalized at 3:32 a.m., not by your team. Not by you. It was found by Amelia Rose." With a deliberate press of a button, the main display blazed to life. The screen didn't show Benjamin's code. It showed a perfect, high-resolution image of the recovered folder Odyssey Solution AR. Inside were Amelia's pristine files, her elegantly commented code, her concise and brilliant explanation, and the Cerberus log file, its timestamp a glaring indictment. 32 a.m. Gasps rippled through the room. Engineers who moments ago radiated relief now stared in shock and disbelief. Benjamin Carter's face turned corpse white, the blood draining as if a plug had been pulled. This is absurd," he stammered, his voice cracking. "A fabrication. She's an opportunist. She must have seen our work somehow, and now she's trying to frame me, to steal my team's victory." "Is she?" Alexander countered, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The quiet fury was more terrifying than any roar. He brought up a new window on the screen, placing it beside Amelia's folder. It was a raw text file, the server's high-level command log. Alexander highlighted 2 damning red lines. "Then perhaps you can explain this log entry to the board, Ben," he said. "It shows that at 3:47 a.m., your administrative account, and only your account, executed the command rmrf Odyssey Solution AR. Immediately after, you cleared the access logs." "For our non-technical board members," Alexander said, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces. "That is the digital equivalent of dousing a document in gasoline and setting it on fire. It is a command for forceful permanent deletion. And the target of that command was a directory named Dark Temp Odyssey Solution AR. He let the implication hang in the dead air for a moment before delivering the final crushing blow. "And then there's this entry, just 1 minute later. A command, again from your account, to manually clear the access log records for that specific directory. You were sloppy, Ben. In your arrogant haste, you wiped your fingerprints from the safe, but you left behind a crystal-clear security. Video of yourself holding the rag. You never thought anyone would look this deep." The room was utterly, profoundly silent. The evidence was absolute. A digital death sentence. Benjamin stared at the screen, his mouth slightly agape, his mind refusing to process his complete and total ruin. The intricate web of lies he had spun in mere hours had been unraveled with cold, technological precision. He looked around at his team, at the board members, at the junior engineers, and saw no support, no sympathy. He saw only disgust, disappointment, and the cold, hard stare of judgment. "The greatest threat to this company isn't a bug," Alexander said, his voice resonating with the conviction of a founder defending the soul of his creation. "It's a flaw in our character, an insidious culture of ego, of credentialism, of arrogance, that would lead a senior manager to steal the work of a junior contributor rather than admit that brilliance can come from anywhere. A culture that would dismiss genius simply because it doesn't have the right title on a business card." He looked directly at Benjamin, his eyes devoid of any pity. You are fired. Effective immediately. Your network access, your key card, your very presence in this company, terminated. Security is waiting for you outside this door. You may collect your personal belongings from your desk and nothing else. Then he turned his steely gaze upon the senior members of Benjamin's team, the ones who had smirked at Amelia, who had fostered the environment of exclusion. And for the rest of you, let this be a lesson. You stood by. You were complicit in your silence. The architecture of this team, and perhaps this entire division, is about to be fundamentally changed. Nexus Dynamics will be a place where talent is the only currency that matters. It will be a true meritocracy, or it will be nothing. Benjamin Carter, utterly broken, pushed his chair back. It scraped loudly in the silent room. He stood, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He didn't say a word, didn't look at anyone. As he walked toward the door, a man stripped of his pride and his career, he stumbled slightly, bumping into a chair. A final clumsy misstep from a man who had orchestrated such a precise, malicious theft. Then he was gone. Later, Alexander found Amelia in his office. She was standing by the vast window, looking out at the sprawling city, now bathed in the warm, clear light of the afternoon sun. She looked small against the backdrop of the skyline she had just helped save. "It's done," he said softly, entering the room. She turned, her eyes showing the exhaustion and stress of the last 48 hours. But they were clear. He deleted everything. "I thought he tried," Alexander corrected her gently. "But you, of all people, should know." "Good. Code, like the truth, always leaves a trace. I found it." He walked over to stand beside her, not as a CEO to a consultant, but as one builder to another. "I am sorry, Amelia, for what he did, and for my own part in this. I almost believed him. I was so desperate for a solution that I nearly accepted. The easiest answer, not the right one. That's a failure of leadership, my failure. I should have known he would try something," she whispered. "I should have been more careful." "No," Alexander said, his voice firm, insistent. "You should be able to do brilliant, world-changing work without having to constantly watch your back for jackals. It is my job to build a place where you can. A job I intend to do much better." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle before unveiling his true purpose. The Gilded Spoon has an unexpected vacancy on their wait staff, effective immediately. Coincidentally, Nexus Dynamics has a vacancy for a senior software architect. More than that, I am creating a new division, effective today, the Systemic Integrity Group. It will report directly to me, and its mandate will be to act as our company's conscience, to challenge every assumption, to stress test our code, our security, and our processes, to find the flaws before the rest of the world does. It needs a leader with a unique perspective, someone who can see the whole system, not just the individual lines of code. "The position is yours, Amelia, if you want it." Amelia stared at him, her mind reeling. Senior architect, head of a division. It was a leap so vast, she hadn't even allowed it to form in her wildest dreams. I don't have a degree," she whispered, the old insecurity, the ghost of her past, making one last stand. Alexander smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "You have something far more valuable. You have the solution. You saw the whole system when an army of experts was lost. In the weeds. That's not something they can teach you at Caltech or anywhere else." "So, Amelia Rose," he said, extending a hand to her, "what do you say? Will you help me build the future of this company?" A slow smile spread across Amelia's face, a brilliant, radiant smile that reached her eyes and erased every last trace of fear. The waitress was gone. The imposter was gone. In her place stood an architect. "Yes," she said, her voice firm and clear as she shook his hand. "Yes, I will." That's the incredible story of Amelia Rose and Alexander Sterling, a testament to the fact that brilliance isn't confined to boardrooms and elite universities. It proves that true talent can be found in the most unexpected places, and that integrity is the most valuable asset any person or company can have. Amelia, the waitress with a hidden gift, didn't just fix a bug in a piece of software. She exposed a flaw in a corporate culture, and in doing so, rebuilt it from the ground up, stronger and more honest than before. Her journey is a powerful reminder to never judge a book by its cover, and to always look for the hidden genius that exists all around us. If this story inspired you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear that their circumstances don't define their potential. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story about the hidden heroes who change the world.